There are some people who say that it's fine for people to be religious as long as they don't vote with their religion. And I honestly think this statement is bullshit, and I absolutely vote with my religion.
So I was at a point back in the day when I thought that being apolitical with my religion was a value. I actually had resolved that this channel would be apolitical, and that any community that I built would be apolitical, that I'd generally just stay away from any kind of political commentary in my public-facing persona, because religion, and especially heathenry, should be accessible to everyone, which is a value that I still hold. If you're left-leaning and a heathen, you're a heathen. If you're right-leaning and a heathen, you're still a heathen. And I know this because I've been both over time. In private, I've always been pretty politically aware that, though my perspective has jumped around all over the place. In high school, I was kind of a Democrat. In college, I wound up becoming more conservative. And I was that, economic conservative, trickle down and the like. But I was left enough on social issues that I wasn't really a committed Republican. I just thought that Democrats were being a little ridiculous, which I still think. And then Trump entered the scene. And I watched the Republican Party bow down to their more embarrassing parts. So I left. I knew too much history to be a Trump supporter, and in the debates and interviews, he seemed ridiculous. And his followers, they did exactly what I thought the Democrats did with the first round of the Obama election. They were falling for a candidate that they imagined him to be, not the candidate that he was. And even in retrospect, I think the Democrats got to know Obama over his first term, and then elected him again in good conscience, or at least knowing what they liked about him. Whereas the remaining Trump supporters still believe Trump to be this magical candidate out of their imagination. So, long story short, I left the Republicans. And as a result, I started re-examining all of my positions one by one, doing a lot of reading on the feasibility of certain positions, the philosophy behind them. I had always known that our country's healthcare was a mess, but I hadn't quite seen how far that rabbit hole went. I went from holding the position that we should get rid of state border restrictions for insurance companies to inspire competition, and went full-on universal healthcare, because health insurance, I figured, is a scam at the end of the day. Why pay a company a monthly stipend only to have them do everything that they can to get out of making payments when you need them? It's essentially paying rent on your body to a landlord who refuses to do repairs for reasons like, well, the roof was already leaky when you moved in, so now that it's raining in your living room, that's on you. And then tying your insurance to your job so that when a pandemic comes and the economy goes to shit, you get fired, lose your insurance, and then you need to find a way to pay for insurance now that you've lost your income. It all just seems counterintuitive. No amount of capitalist competition between companies for lower prices are going to fix these issues. And as you can imagine, I wound up becoming a Bernie supporter kind of thing. And even did some phone banking, flipping conservatives to Bernie. But, we all know how that went. But whatever the case, I still held at that point that having politics inspired by my religion wasn't a good thing, even though researching these issues as a pagan or even as a Celtic Christian had no doubt contributed to these conclusions that I now held. And toward the end of my time as a Christian, I'd been seeing the toxicity of Christian influence on politics. And from my view at the time, those elements were a toxic practice of Christianity. Again, a position I still hold, as I think that there are better ways to practice the faith, which is something that I find among Celtic Christians and Episcopalians especially. But in there was a little bit of a holdover. Because of those toxic elements of Christianity that I'd grown up around, I tried to compartmentalize my politics from my religion, because I thought at the time that the problem with Christians was they didn't do that. So I figured, no, as a polytheist, we want a tolerant society. This means I should keep my religion to myself and not insert it into my political beliefs. This is something where I eventually figured out I was wrong. And I think that this is a rut that a lot of pagans kind of get themselves stuck in. Because like latent Christianity, there's a subtle little brother to it, which is this idea that we have to chase away all aspects of our Christian selves in order to leave it behind. And that includes this proclivity of religion to become intertwined with our political opinions. But oddly enough, it's actually an aspect of Christianity that gives us this mindset that it can be separated. Christianity when converting pagans in its entirely peaceful, honest crusades in the north, one of the most important elements of conversion was that it wasn't a cultural faith in the same way as many polytheist religions. Heathenries and Celtic polytheisms of the time were very much ingrained in the culture of the time, which is why many of these religions don't really have historical names. They were just part of life. This is one part of why we call these religions today things like heathenry and Celtic polytheism. They didn't call these religions anything then, so we've named them today because that's the convention. But when we convert from one of these more culturally mobile religions, such as Christianity or Islam, and into a polytheist faith, latent Christianity will make us see it the same way for a while. It's just another system. But the further I got into heathenry, the more I saw the reason why these religions were nameless. These were people that were part of cultures, and from their perspective, these were the gods. Such that if one traveled to another place and came back having adopted the practice of another polytheist faith, it would be seen as just another god among many being worshipped by the traveler. We see as well how the worship of these gods were practiced in their time as being integral to the society. Festivals would stop everything, for example. A historical example of the gods intertwining with culture would be an event that happened in a Greek colony around 400 BC. An armada of 300 warships was approaching Torioi. A great north wind came and destroyed the entire fleet, saving the city. The response from the Taurians was to hold a vote, and they decided to make Boreas, the god of northern wind, a citizen of their city. He was afforded a house, which served as a temple, and land, which paid for that temple. This attitude was quite normal in ancient Greece. The gods, nature, and the fate of their city were intertwined, and they repaid that deity with honor through a vote of the citizenry. The history of polytheism is filled with events like these, and that results in the Reconstructionists having a hard time actually compartmentalizing religion from politics, because they're readily associated. But let's bring this into a more modern context, because despite how badly any Reconstructionist wants to live in the depths of history, we don't. We live in this strange and often haunting political climate. So, an obvious reason why pagans have to be political in their religion is that simply being pagan is a political act, even in secret. And the mere existence of the broom closet and the reason why we have to be in secret is an effect of politics. Christianity is ingrained in the greater culture of many nations, like it or not. And if not Christianity, then Islam, And neither of which really take too kindly to pagans, especially witches. So the moment we say something compounds this issue. Utilizing our rights to public practice of our faith is political. An example of this that has nothing to do with any hot button issue is this. A group of us that practice together were figuring out places to hold ritual. None of us really had houses that were available quite yet. And so we held ritual in a public park. We picked a park that was out of the way. We reserved a pavilion. We held ritual near the lake. And we were completely within our rights, and no issue came up. We also picked a place that was fairly hidden for a number of reasons. One, we wanted privacy for ourselves. Conducting ritual can be very personal. But mainly, we didn't want trouble. And we knew that it was possible that we would find it simply for conducting ritual. But we damn well did it. And we damn well had the right. And yet we still felt like we were getting away with something in the end. But that rhetoric that religion should stay out of our politics is something oft repeated by pagans and others. And I think that not only is this wrong, but no one really does it. First, trying to be apolitical is political. It's bystanding. Standing by is an action and is in itself political. And in all the time that I've spent in heathenry, that's just not how it expresses itself. It's not its history, and it stands against the words of Odin, which in the Havamal say plainly, when you see misdeeds, speak out against them, and give your enemies no frith. And it's important to note that no one else is withholding their beliefs from their politics. Anti-theists, most notorious for repeating this rhetoric, promoting people to keep their religion out of their politics, they have several organizations that advocate for political secularism with mixed results as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes they're right on the mark. Other times, it seems that their goals are to limit religious freedoms. And yes, it is obvious that this influences their politics. And sometimes they're simply advocating against religion right down to holding a theistic position. This use of speech to influence culture is, in and of itself, political. With Christians, there's the obvious negative examples, such as hardline limitation on abortion rights, or creationism in schools and the like. But, I'll give a positive one. Martin Luther King Jr.'s fight for racial equality and civil rights were rooted in his Christian faith. So too was his anti-war advocacy during Vietnam. An intuitive position that polytheists should be fighting for, and grounding their positions in, is not secularism, as many often do, but pluralism, which is largely the opposite. It's a position not of complete separation of religion from public life, but an embracing tolerance and understanding of it. Among polytheists, this is largely what's held in our communities. This is why fellow YouTuber Leakai and myself can be completely different religions, and yet still very much on the same page on a number of issues, and applaud one another in our exploration of our distinct faiths and philosophies that they stem from. It is also from this standard that we may criticize other, more intolerant faiths, such as folkish forms of our own faiths, or Christians that wish to suppress the religious freedoms of others. And it's here that we see the distinction between a harmful approach versus a more reasonable approach. Atheists, Christians, pagans, and others who vote with our values and morals in mind are doing that thing of integrating religion with our politics. Atheists without the religion, but you get the idea. It crosses the line when you try and legislate your ideals onto others, especially in a way that violates human rights. You want to be a creationist, for example? That is fine, but you're not going to be overruling a science class to teach your very obviously off-topic ideas to students who have no stock in creationism. In the science class, you're going to learn science, and the science of the day leads us to certain conclusions, creationism not among them. I've had the same experience that I mentioned of camaraderie with Hindus, which account for a large amount of polytheism in the world, though not regarded as pagan per se, and it should be noted that Hinduism is varied and not all of its expressions are polytheistic. But the problem comes in when these faiths start to adopt views rooted in intolerance and exclusivity, such as the politically nationalist movements that we've seen costumed in heathenry and Hinduism, or superstitious positions, such as those in direct opposition to established science, like homeopathy or the anti-vax position. These are things that we should be fighting against, but in order to do so, we must largely insert our religion into our politics. Heathens, in my opinion, have no excuse. We are probably the second biggest pagan demographic in America next to Wicca, and the largest Reconstructionist religion. Among recons, we have the most people, the biggest personality, and the most problems. And each of those imparts on us a responsibility to act. So yes, my religion is political. And yes, I damn well will vote based on it. But let me know your thoughts. I'm interested in whether or not you agree with me on this one. People have different ideas about what it means for their religion to be political, and there are many people who I respect who refuse to let their religion be political. But I ultimately decided that this is not the case for me personally. So definitely let me know where you're at on this issue. And finally, hail to my patrons for making this content possible. It's good to have people at your back. Please like, subscribe, punch that bell in the face, and remember to find a way or make one.